dom-sub relationship where the man gets the woman to do all of his domestic labor is just like patriarchy with latex on. Hello, I'm Summer Tothill and I regularly run Q&As with my supporters on Instagram on matters relating to gender equality. So what you're about to watch is 1 week's worth of these, and if you would like to get involved with them yourself, just come and follow me on Instagram at Summer Tothill. While you're here, please stick around and subscribe to my channel and check out the rest of the Ask a Feminist playlist. How to respond to a male client who regularly calls you and your female colleagues pet names. Ugh, I hate this for you, so I'm going to try to help you sort it out. But just a little disclaimer, I haven't worked in customer service in more than 20 years. And also, I am not a relationships expert or a counselor, and I am not personally great with managing conflict or managing challenging behavior in the moment. So take all of that with you when you listen to what I have to say. But firstly, I just want to validate that you are right to be angry about this, because when you are in a service role, when you are in any role where you're dealing with a client or customer, you don't have the power they do. And people are not always aware as customers that they have the power, but men generally are, and a certain subset of them quite enjoys the fact that there is an uneven power dynamic between customer and service worker or provider. And so, of course, it makes you feel icky that he is taking advantage of this difficult position that you are in, where if you're in the service industry, you're having to provide emotional labor to this person. But even if you're, let's say, I don't know, a graphic designer with a client, you still have to mollify and listen to this person, even if he treats you slightly disrespectfully. So there are going to have to be ways to manage this in the moment where he doesn't feel as though you're attacking him. And if he does, please be aware that if he arcs up and misbehaves, it is perfectly okay to fire a client or fire a customer. Sometimes people have to do it. If they are unwilling to behave respectfully, then you don't have to take them in any capacity at all. But of course, that's probably not the outcome that you want. So we're going to have to take steps to make sure that it doesn't escalate to that first. First, I would say if you're not the manager of this situation, make sure that you speak to the manager and get their buy-in on the fact that you're going to talk to this client about this, because that way, if he tries to escalate it to the manager will already be appraised of the situation and will be on your side. Then next time it happens, you can try something very, very simple, like when he calls you, say, sweetie, and your name is Sarah, you can just go, actually, my name is Sarah. Or you can say, actually, my name's not Sweetie, it's Sarah, and I'm happy for you to call me Sarah. And you can ask for his name. What's your name? John. Lovely to meet you, John. Sometimes when you try to police men's behavior, though, like that, they really arc up and they go like, I'm just being nice. And that's when you have to bring out that big gun of like, right, but would you like it if I called you Sweetie? And hopefully he can see the logic there. And if he can't, that's when your final step is to start calling him by pet names. He'll get pissed off, he'll probably leave, but you will have won. Tips for dealing with the social isolation that comes from being an active feminist. Firstly, I'm sorry to hear that's happening to you. Social isolation is really hard to deal with, and it can also be really distressing to know that when you move more into a value set that feels true to you, it tends to cause some people to cast themselves off from your life. But I think one of the important things to remember in trying to deal with this is that losing people who don't align with your values is not really a loss. And it also makes room in your life for you to take on people who do align with your values. I would say I haven't become socially isolated from becoming a much more public feminist, but there definitely are sacrifices. You know, there have been men in my life who I had thought better of who have unfollowed me, and it can be a little depressing to find that they weren't who I thought they were, and I thought they were made of stronger stuff, but apparently they're marshmallows. That's hard. Being and feeling socially isolated is really bad for you. It's terrible for your mental health. It's terrible for your ongoing well-being. So what you're going to have to try and do is actively seek out people who do align with your feminist and progressive values. For me, I find because I have heaps and heaps and heaps of queer friends, it's not difficult to find those values. Not that all queer people are necessarily progressive, but there is a much stronger Venn diagram overlap there. And I'm not saying that we should always, if you're a cis person, lean on queer communities to validate us, but just To create genuine friendships and relationships of mutual support with queer people can really help you as a feminist to find your tribe. And also keep in mind there's a lot of women out there who just require a little bit of talking to and a little bit of being listened to discover that you actually have the same values as them, and you will find yourself making new friends who align with you. Even though I know my feminism is the right choice for me, I am still sugarcoating / apologetic about it. So this is weirdly a very similar question to the previous one, and it's about having to sugarcoat your feminism in order to not put people off when you meet them. And like, to be perfectly honest, this is something I haven't even necessarily solved for myself. In some ways, my work goes before me, and if people have ever seen me online, then they already know what my values are, but that doesn't necessarily apply in all cases, and I certainly can find myself not wanting to nail my flags to the mast in front of new people. But at the same time, like I said in the previous answer, if you do have a strong value set, then that can help you to find the people who do agree with you. And sometimes you might be pleasantly surprised by who ends up sort of coming out of the woodwork and declaring themselves in allyship with you. And that has certainly happened to me. Sometimes people who I maybe have prejudged based on a stereotype end up being very much in alignment with and supportive of what I do. And the other thing is, you don't have to make clear every single value you have in every interaction with people, but it is not inappropriate to fight against things that you think are wrong or bigoted in the moment. And it's not unfair or rude of you to do that. Like, I have made a few other videos before saying, when you have that classic interaction of like your uncle at the Christmas holiday dinner table says something really bigoted, and then you dig in and arc up about it and fight about it, you're not rude for fighting back. He was rude for assuming that he could say something blatantly bigoted in front of company in the first place. And I think sometimes remembering that you have the moral right of fighting to uplift disenfranchised people is the right thing. And so you need not be ashamed or sugarcoat it. What are your thoughts on the phrase daddy issues? I'm so glad you asked this because I'd love the chance to talk about it. Men love to throw out the term daddy issues when they see a woman expressing anything akin to feminist values or something along the lines of disillusionment and displeasure with men's behavior, particularly in the dating realm, but it can spread out into everything else as well. And it is a classic way of men deflecting and dismissing women's actual concerns with men and the patriarchy by attributing it to a mental health phenomenon. Because the understanding with the idea of daddy issues is that it has given you like attachment issues or psychological issues. It's basically the classical thing of women are hysterical. But what is so ironic about daddy issues is that it's just acknowledging that the behavior of a man in a woman's life, particularly a man with power and who had responsibilities to protect and provide for her, if he doesn't uphold those responsibilities, can affect her long term. So like, I made this meme a while ago, which was like that classic Mean Girls meme of like, so you agree, you think you're pretty. But it was like, you know, when men say women have daddy issues, it's like, so you agree. Men have let women down in all walks of life and it has an effect on our mental health and well-being ongoing. Yeah, that's true. Thank you for admitting that. And I'm not dismissing that women can have really negative experiences at the hands of their fathers, whether they were present or absent, and that can have really long-lasting effects on their abilities to form healthy relationships with men or any kind of healthy romantic relationships, even queer relationships in the future. But the men who like to roll out this accusation aren't thinking about that, and they don't care about improving anything in women's experience of being parented by their father, and they certainly don't care about increasing things like men's participation in the home, men becoming stay-at-home fathers at a greater rate, men having more emotional stability and ability to work through their issues with, say, a therapist to become the best parent they can be, All men care about is discrediting women when women say men have not been treating me right, or the patriarchy is oppressive, or men don't have to be the center of the universe for a woman romantically. So yeah, it's just another way of calling women crazy, but it's the most ironic one out there. Men that make OF content and yet hate exotic dances. How is this not crazy? It is crazy. It's totally crazy. It's just yet another example of men wanting to have one rule for how women's sexuality is expressed and a different one for their own. To be honest, I haven't actually seen this phenomenon myself. It's usually men who are not themselves sex workers or porn actors who are hating on women for creating OnlyFans or porn content and yet are the first to consume that content themselves. And usually the motivation for this way of thinking is that men as a whole and the patriarchy as a whole doesn't like women owning the means of production. And if that is selling their own body, particularly when it comes to sex, men in the patriarchy don't like for women to own that, and they don't like us to have control over that. They are fine for women to behave sexually as long as men are ultimately the ones controlling how we behave sexually. So it is ironic for a male OF creator to have a problem with another kind of SW, right? My suspicion here is that it's just another example of the typical misogyny that exists within a patriarchal society. So even if a man is an SW himself, that doesn't mean that he's not going to enact the typical misogyny of denigrating and dismissing women's pursuits anyway. And exotic dances is one like very traditionally female SW activity, even though women are not the only ones who do it. So I just see it as another extension of men wanting to dismiss, control, and disenfranchise women and their efforts to make their own money, create a narrative for themselves, control an aspect or a business that has to do with sex. And frankly, just like the question about daddy issues, it's just men being classically in an irony of patriarchy that they don't even see for themselves. But exotic dancing is a very difficult and magnificent art form, so more power to you. Don't listen to what these men say. What rules to have in a polyamorous or open relationship? Your thoughts? Well, the simple answer to this is that every single open relationship can have its own rules, negotiated respectfully by the participants in that relationship. So, for example, some people can be under the impression that if you have an open relationship, both persons at the center of that relationship should be telling each other everything about what they're getting up to with other people. But that doesn't have to be the case. You could have one person in that relationship who does feel the need to hear what the other person is doing and where they're going and when, and then the other person in that relationship can be like, don't ask, don't tell. I don't want to know anything about it. It's enough for me to know that you're doing it. Here are the rules around you being safe, and that's what we're going to do. People also tend to assume that an open relationship has to be open on both sides. But actually, in some relationships, only one person goes out and sees other people, and their partner is like, I'm fine for you to do that, but I don't need to do that myself. The main thing really is that it has to be based on a model of consent and respect and without a trace of exploitation. And that can be the hard thing to navigate in, especially in a heterosexual relationship, because men can often come in with a list of demands and expectations that is supposed to be like a progressive relationship model, but effectively just replicates existing hegemonies of power dynamics between men and women, in the same way that like a dom-sub relationship where the man gets the woman to do all of his domestic labor is just like patriarchy with latex on. The main thing I would say to keep in mind is don't get taken for a ride or exploited, and please make sure that you know that your feelings are valid. If you start to feel like you're being exploited, lied to, betrayed, your safety is being compromised, you don't have to stick with it. And you are not like less of a feminist or less of a progressive person. If you want to have a monogamous relationship, or if you want to put in place certain rules. That's it for this Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Find me on Instagram at summertothill. That's summer with an O, spelt the same way as you see in this YouTube channel. I can't wait to see you there.